Hey, what's good? And welcome to another episode of The Listening Practice. My name is Coflo. I'll be your host in this long format nerdy discussion around music, art, and all the things that entertain me and fascinate me about this world of music, all with more of a dance floor frequency. On this episode, we have a special one. I think they're all special, but realistically, this one is special because I don't know how much of this type of musical endeavor I really want to do. It's stuff that really fascinates me, but is it something that I want to really source out an effort, podcast after podcast to be able to dive into things like this? What am I talking about? It's so ominous. Well, this episode is a mixer shootout. We're going to take some analog mixers, some digital mixers, quite a slew of different styles of mixers, mostly in the, I would say, crafted for like kind of the dance music legacy, including some like legendary pieces of equipment. And I have the most non-scientific approach of trying to be somewhat scientific, but mostly creative to try and do a mixer shootout where we're listening to these different mixers side by side, analyzing some of the stuff that's going on with them. For some of you, there'll be a little bit of an educational process. It'll definitely be an educational process for myself. It's a lot, and to kind of put something together like this and to be able to source the equipment is rather difficult, especially to try to do it with comparative results like this. And I wouldn't have been able to do it if it wasn't for my homie JV Velasco, who has a beautiful mixer collection. I myself only own a couple of mixers, in which case I brought one of them for the comparison of the shootout. The other mixer that I own, he already had one, so we just went with his. But yeah, if it wasn't for my brother JV, we wouldn't have been able to even do the shootout. So first off, big shout out to JV for making that happen. Second, big shout out to all my Patreon fam. This podcast is brought to you by my Patreon family. You can support for literally like a cup of coffee, or I guess just like an inadequate chocolate croissant from Starbucks or something, if you head on over to patreon.com/Coflo, where you get VIP promos, early access to content like this. You become a part of that executive producer community for various projects that I have going on in the future. So I appreciate you, Patreon fam. If you want to support, head over to patreon.com/Coflo, show your love. And if you're already in support, thank you so much. I hope you enjoy this episode as well as more episodes to come in the future. Okay, so let's get into it. What do we got going on here? Let's start by talking about the setup. So here on the screen is just a crap picture of me kind of showing what's going on with the setup. So I had a CDJ 3000, pretty standard stuff nowadays in like dance music clubs. I had it hooked up via analog, not digital. And the reason why I didn't do a digital out was because not all the mixers had digital inputs. So I went with your standard kind of RCA analog output, which would go into whatever mixer I was testing. Here on the screen, you could see my Euphonia. It would go into one of the channels. I would then level the audio with the input if there was an input trim to make sure that there was sufficient headroom so I wasn't purposely clipping any of the channels. But at the same time, if the mixer had a particular signal path that allowed me to then drive the signal going out, I would drive the signal into territories that would expect a bit of coloration, I would assume, if the mixer had that. For example, on the Euphonia, there is a circuit path where after the input has been trimmed, there around your unity point, you can actually drive into their Neve circuit. I guess we could talk about what some of that looks like later when we look at that mixer's results. But case in point, I tried to make it as fair as possible without being ultra scientific, just trying to make sure that there was headroom. I wasn't clipping the channel, and I was getting a nice tone, but not like some low tone. Like, basically trying to emulate the signal coming out of the mixer as if it was in a club environment. Then the output of that was routed into the input channels here, the left and right channels on my Apollo Twin from Universal Audio. It's a nice interface. It's not the nicest interface in the world, but it's also not like, a $50 flea market special. So it's a nice interface. I made sure, again, I had plenty of headroom, so I wasn't clipping the inputs of that channel. And I didn't do any kind of like preamplification or any kind of high pass filtering or anything along those lines. So for the most part, you are getting a mixture of the pure quality output of the mixer going into the most clear path that I could provide using that interface. This is why I say it's non-scientific. And for those of you who are like, okay, makes sense to me, there's so many avenues of the file that's a digital file coming from a USB stick, an uncompressed WAV or AIF file coming from the USB stick, being digitally processed, sent out, converted to analog, that's being sent into a mixer, which in a lot of cases, the mixer could be converting the analog signal back into digital and then output back in analog for those that have a digital signal flow, like the Euphonia. And then once again, being converted from analog back into digital, which is then being recorded by my MacBook in Logic. So it gets tricky, and a lot of people don't even think about these conversion points of digital to audio and how just the conversion technology alone plays a role in the impact of the signal. And, there's so many other things to consider the quality of what you get when listening to something coming out of a mixer. It could be the mixer itself, the way the mixer is designed. It could be the way the person's playing against the mixer. Are they giving enough headroom? Are they clipping the channel? Are they not driving the signal hard enough, depending on the style of mixer? Then, of course, you have the actual room itself, the conversions, if there's, some kind of digital processing going on in the amplifier or some other intermediary piece of technology before the sound gets amplified by the speakers. So there's all these conversion points happening, all these different things going on. And I'm not one of those guys to argue to say a pure analog signal is the best or a good quality, various insert digital conversion signal is going to be more advantageous. I'm not here to argue with one side or the other being better. I'm just here to kind of like, start to peel away at some of the science in a somewhat scientific, but really not scientific way, because I tried to create a control, but I didn't have like a million other test scenarios. There's a lot of things, a lot of variables. And for those of you who are really nerdy, you're already thinking about all the fucking variables that potentially would be causing issues or be causing or things to try to eliminate or things to test against. This is all to say in this episode, and what we're going to look at here is not taking everything into account. It was very, let's try to control this scenario with this signal flow. Let's use the exact same cables. Let's try to do our best to get a similar recording volume, all those kind of things. And then in post, I'm able to kind of just level match. So as we're listening, things have an even volume, but the recording has, plenty of headroom, that sort of thing. So this is all to say what went on, what are the mixers that we looked at, what are some of the differences. There's some things that I wasn't excited to listen for. As we were running the tests, some of the things that I was listening to was interesting, but then it'll be interesting to hear how things sound here in real time. I've done very little analysis, so we're going to be in true podcast fashion. We're going to be doing this in real time. So, I'll try to speak my thoughts as I'm kind of listening through this and we'll go for it. So, let's start with talking about the test track. I think it's important to talk about the test track and some of the tests that I set up and like my general thought process behind it. And, then we'll be able to, take that starting point and be able to compare that against the mixers and be able to look at things, A and B them. Some of it we'll listen to, some of it we'll, do some analyzation. And we'll see how that rolls out. So here is the test track. And essentially in the test track, I did 2 test tones. And the idea behind the test tones was a clean look of something so that I could analyze harmonics. and I'll talk about like at a very high level what that is and why that potentially is important to how these mixers behave and what they do to the sound. And then I had a song that is generally less compressed. There's definitely compression taking place, but less compressed, so I wasn't limiting the signal. So we have, something dynamic and has a vocal in it, because I think that vocals a lot of the times are one of the most sincere things when you start to color, saturate, compress, affect, or manipulate sound. Vocals are one of those things that, because biologically humans, we communicate and we use vocals to communicate. It's like a thing. It's the one instrument in music that has its own desert island kind of like vibe to it. It lives on its own no matter what. It's something that is we understand and tend to hear with the most nuance, deciphering language and intelligibility, tonal ideas. We can immediately develop a picture in our head at what the person potentially looks like. There's so many things to a vocal that when vocals are manipulated by equipment, different sets of equipment, I feel like it's good to have a vocal sample, because we probably will identify changes in that versus other stuff like a guitar or bass or certain things that maybe we don't hear as well. Vocals are like a sweet spot for that. So I wanted to make sure I had something very dynamic with a vocal in it. And then I had something that's very much compressed, mastered, so to speak, very loud with a vocal in it. Then going to something that's more machiney, synthesized, that's more dynamic, again, less limited, not, mastered, so to speak, but has lots of dynamic range to kind of see what it does with that. And then a different tune that is in the same lane of like synthesized machines, less, vocal, no vocals, so not vocally driven, but very compressed and mastered. And you'll see that like peak values wise, I tried to make sure that headroom wise things were pretty even in the test track, so that headroom and frequencies and the different values of those frequencies that get used, hopefully headroom wise things will be more even. So it'll be interesting to see how the mixer handles some of those tones and frequencies. Now, obviously, something that's very compressed, and for those who know, something that's very compressed or limited is going to be much perceivably louder and have more power than something that is going to be more dynamic at the same peak level. Meaning, if the loudest points are the same between the two, the one that's compressed, if we're looking at this as an example, this box here, this is going to be much louder to us. It just in general, we're going to be like, oh, this is much louder. However, if we were able to turn this up and use all the extra headroom comparatively and try to match the perceived loudness, the impact being that we have all the dynamics will feel, in my opinion, more impactful. So if we're able to turn up, this track much louder than this track in terms of peak value, to get it to make sure it feels as loud as this compressed one, the impact will be more rich, more deep. It's kind of like the way I like to describe this stuff when I'm talking to students or folks that are, maybe more on the music production side and less on the engineering side. I like to draw the reference of, using something like chocolate as an example, where when something's mastered, it's not to say that it can't sound fantastic, but it's kind of like, Hershey's chocolate in terms of, it's sweet and it delivers an idea of chocolate. But when you have something that's not as compressed, but you can play it as loud as something that's compressed, you have like a really fine Swiss chocolate or Austrian, delectable or something that's rich and has like more to it that you can identify with, rather than just the taste of chocolate and it sounds sweet. Again, it's not to say that something compressed won't sound good. It's just the difference of how much compression gets used versus not. So why do I say all this? Just to recap, having those differences to see how the mixer reacts to that, I think is an important test, because I've heard OGs say without any level of support other than their artistic taste, which when you've been in the game for 30, 40 years, 50 years, what have you, even if you have no science behind you, your opinion is still a level of experience and science that I will take into account. I've heard like OGs say like XYZ mixer is perfect for disco or perfect for this generation of music because of what it does with dynamics and because of what it does to color the signal and how these things were mixed. The frequencies used just sound more rich through this mixer, etc. And I'm not saying that that's bullshit. I mean, it might be, but scientifically, but you can't count that stuff out. So why not me, in the most unscientific way, try to provide some value there with having something dynamic, vocal driven, something compressed, vocal driven, something dynamic and electronic and instrumental versus something, not dynamic, or something extremely compressed, not as dynamic, instrumental. And I mean, I could go on and do this test with so many different genres of music, but I just kind of stuck to some stuff that I made. So it's like, at the very least, y'all don't know the tunes, but I know the tunes intimately. I've heard them on loop 1,000 times. All these tunes I've played out, and in some cases, been playing out the last 2 years, on various different sound systems around the world. So it's like I have like an idea of what things sound like in my studio, and then I have this idea of what it sounds like in all these other scenarios. So let's check out what's going on in the test tones. Let's actually check out the material so you can listen to the material as is, and it'll give you a good idea. So the first thing is I did a 100 hertz test tone. Then I did the 1,000 hertz test tone. Then I did the dynamic song, the non-dynamic song, etc. So here is the 100 hertz test tone. It's just a low tone, right? Here's the 1,000 hertz test tone. Yep, it's just test tones, not exciting, but you'll see why I did it in the future. Here's a little snippet of that dynamic tune. Right, and then here is a snippet of the tune that's more compressed with a vocal element. All right, and here's a snippet of electronic tune that is unlimited, less compressed. And then here is the more compressed instrumental tune. All right, so there you have it. That's our test track. And as you can see, with each one of these tracks, we have a different mixer, and I basically have ran all those tracks through the mixer, through each mixer. Again, as I explained at the beginning, how I balance that. And then in post-production and recording, what I did was I loosely lined up everything, so it all is more or less going to start on time. So if we're A-Bing, hopefully it won't be like a crazy jump in terms of where the song is at. The other thing that I did was I went through and I level matched these to a particular loudness or perceived loudness using an LUFS rating. So for those who are wondering, I tried to measure things out around -11.5-ish LUFS. So that way, regardless of how loud the general recording was, I took this loudest, song or this end song that was compressed and used that as my kind of starting point. So yeah, other parts of the test recording will be quieter, but the idea is that from test track, from mixer to mixer, etc., the level should be more or less the same. So for listening and jumping back and forth, it's not like one all of a sudden feels really loud and one feels really quiet. Ideally, they're all going to be very similar. And me going through and leveling that before starting this video already taught me about how some of the mixers would treat headroom and how they worked. For example, a lot more low-end characteristics coming out of some of the mixers. Therefore, to get something louder or to get something even, it's actually needed to have less headroom in order for it to feel even. So some of you, that makes a lot of sense because you understand kind of how we tend to hear things. But for some of you, you might not understand that. I'm not going to take this video to go into a deep dive on things like equal loudness curve or Fletcher-Munch, I can't remember how you say the name. The curve that's essentially like an equal loudness curve, or maybe it was the predecessor to the general equal loudness curve. But we don't hear all frequencies the same. The short of it is when we're looking at frequencies or a spectrum of frequencies. So for example, you're not going to hear anything, but we have a song playing. The frequencies that are down here in this area are lower frequencies. The frequencies over here on the right are higher frequencies. We hear around this area, kind of the back third or back quarter towards the right. These frequencies in here, we hear these frequencies really well comparatively to down here. We don't hear these low end frequencies good at all. We just don't hear them well. So in order for us to hear something down here as good as we hear up over here, usually we have to have a lot more volume coming from that than we do over here. So that's to say some of these mixers, because of how the output is, just the general output. I didn't do any EQing on these mixers. I didn't do any trimming in terms of EQ volume. If they have an isolator, I didn't do any isolationing, tweaking, or boosting, or attenuating. I tried to keep everything flat, just trimmed if the mixer had a trim to make sure that there was headroom and things weren't clipping. And then I drove the signal out once again to a point where it's driving as close to like unity or whatever is going to drive the mixer correctly. So I tried to make it even so that when I came back in post, I could see some of the mixers would eat up headroom in the low end because the mixer was just maybe adding more value there. Or in the case of some of the mixers being a bit older, maybe they were off balance, like the right channel was a little louder than the left channel or so on. So why did we use test tones, right? So here's my 100 hertz test tone. Why did I use a test tone? Let me spread this out. So that little jump you see is the looping back in the audio clicking on itself. So you're getting like this added stuff. So what we're looking at here is essentially like a pure sine test tone at 100 hertz. And the reason why I wanted to use 100 hertz and 1000 hertz, not only are they drastically different in terms of where we hear things, but my thought process was knowing in the engineering world, using things like saturators and compressors and so on, that some of these mixers, if not all of them, would be coloring the signal in some way, depending on like a pure tone. So it would be cool to see, giving it one or two tones, what that coloration was, like what it actually was doing. Now, for those of you who hear people talk about coloration and you hear about like, oh, it feels warm, it feels this, it feels that, but you have no idea, like you say these things, but you maybe have no idea what that actually is doing to the signal. I thought it would be cool as an exploratory part of the shootout to at least look at that stuff besides like opinionated wise, how it feels, what it's doing to the music. Like actually look at what, in my test scenario, again, you saw my setup, what was actually taking place. So 100 hertz tone, how are things being colored? How are things being saturated? And the idea would be to look for things that get introduced in terms of what you would consider harmonics. And a lot of the times harmonics tend to come in a couple different flavors. The most common in the engineering world is like your even order harmonics, and then you have like your odd order harmonics. So I used ChatGPT essentially to try and list out some information. Again, this is ChatGPT. ChatGPT is far from perfect. This fool be screwing up left and right. But this is stuff that if you want to do some research, there's lots of great information on YouTube, lots of great information out there in general, whether you're using an AI curator or not, or what have you. But there's a lot of stuff that you can read into this and start to learn about characteristics of harmonics and what saturation, what compression can do, and all these different things. And ChatGPT gave me a really cool rundown of stuff. So explaining harmonic orders. So when you saturate audio, which essentially what, you know, these mixers could be doing, but also just in terms of amplification or compression, like we'll see that some of these mixers actually add compression. You'll see that when you saturate the audio, you tend to generate frequencies above the original tone. Hence why I used 100 hertz and 1000 hertz, just to kind of see what would get generated above, right? So if this is 100 hertz, is it generating information above, right? Going to the right. When they say above, they're meaning higher frequencies, right? Or if I had 1000 hertz tone, right? So if like, for example, this guy, is it generating frequencies above this? Is it also generating frequencies below it, right? So trying to get an idea of what those are, right? The fundamental, it would be considered the original pitch. So the original tone, in this case, 100 or 1000 hertz. A second harmonic could be 2 times the frequency. So for those of you, maybe you play an instrument, you can think about an octave, right? Or you could think about like on a guitar, the 12th fret or what have you, or on a keyboard, the 12th tone, right? So 1 octave jump, C to C, etc. Third harmonic, 3 times the frequency, etc. So for example, 100 hertz tone. Hey, what do you know? We're using 100 hertz, 200 hertz, 300 hertz, 400 hertz, right? So it keeps jumping each time, right? Wouldn't be an octave each time, right? Because an octave from 200 would be 400. An octave from 400 would be 800. But these are like the example of the fundamental versus the second versus the third, etc. Then you have this concept of even harmonics, which this is great because this is exactly how it was explained to me in the books that I read many years ago. But usually these harmonics are perceived as warm, smooth, musical, thick. They have a hi-fi pleasantness. So it's kind of like, you know, there's a vibe, so to speak, that feels musical, right? And those harmonics would be the second, the fourth, the sixth, if you were generating them evenly in terms of order of multiplication, right? Those are often associated with the types of transformers or things that color signals, like tubes, mixed desk transformers, like it's supposed to be in Euphonia, tape machines, optical compressors, like tube-based compressors. They use light, right? Then you have the second order harmonic is most famous with the warmth harmonic, right? Then you have the odd harmonics, the third, the fifth, the seventh, etc., right? So the odd numbers. Those are generally described as more aggressive, edgy, gritty, punchy. There's more obvious distortion, which is like it's a lot of the times. So associated with transistor clipping, right? So the clipping or the shredding of a signal, not attenuating, so not lowering a signal like a limiter often does, but like literally clipping the signal. FET circuits, circuits that are used in really famous, fast, aggressive compressors. Diode clipping, again, clipping the signal, which will cause these overtones, right? These harmonics. Hard digital saturation, so like literally bits, like ones and zeros, and the manipulation of those. Third harmonics are super common in punchy compressors and aggressive analog gear. So this is to say, like me sitting from more of like a producer engineer standpoint, I tend to associate even harmonics and the things of warmth and thickness as being something that I reach to when I'm going to color or saturate a signal, trying to achieve something that sounds bigger, but characteristically just more filled in. Versus a lot of times if I'm reaching for things that maybe add odd harmonics when I'm coloring or saturating, I'm looking for things to really start to poke through. So you can think of it like if I have a vocal and I really want that vocal to stand out, a lot of the times I will take a part of that vocal in parallel. I'm not going to get into that conversation for today, but I'll over compress it or over saturate it with odd harmonics and then blend that back into the signal. So it's like, it's not the main signal. So you're not listening to the messiness of it, but it kind of like becomes like this bedrock. It's like adding just the right amount of salt, but there could be a lot of salt there. I'm just adding just a little bit in so you can finally taste it. So that's generally how I associate those harmonics when I'm making music. One important thing, compression itself can generate harmonics even without explicit saturation. That's actually a really good point. Again, non-scientific and definitely not a podcast episode about compression. I implore you to look up at least the basics if you don't know anything about compression, but essentially controlling the dynamics of the audio, meaning you can see it here. If you look at this series of audio versus this series of audio, this one has lots of dynamic range, meaning there's loud parts and there's quiet parts, which is why it looks like a comb. Where this one looks like a block of cheese, all the dynamics of the loud parts and the quiet parts have been squeezed together, so they're closer together, hence more compressed, right? So compression itself can generate harmonics even without explicit saturation. That's important to know. Why? Because gain reduction is non-linear. That's actually pretty cool. And a lot of people try to develop technology to try and deal with that by using like the sorcery of ones and zeros to look ahead in the future and to kind of deal with information coming in before the compressor reacts to it. So rather than digressing too much, I just wanted to make sure that this is something that, as I look, there's at least like some explanation as to why I brought this into play. So let's start with looking at the first mixer and just look at the harmonics, and we'll go from mixer to mixer, spend a little time looking at those harmonics, and then we'll go through and start to analyze how the music sounds, because I think a lot of the analyzation is going to be just to crack the hood at what kind of coloration the mixer had, and then we can like be artistic about it and be like, oh, how does this song sound on this mixer versus this mixer, etc. So the first mixer in the Shootout was a Rane Empath, the Rotary edition, which is a mixer I've had for a long time, and JV has one, which was great because then I didn't need to bring mine. Here's a little video clip. You can see us. This was us recording the mixer here, just sitting on the table, and you can see kind of how it's set up. Yeah, just regular old running it, running the trim, making sure I'm not clipping. And for those of you interested in reading more about the mixer, the data sheets here, you can go on to ranecommercial.com or just type into Google Rane Empath Rotary spec sheet and it'll come up. I don't want to like talk about all these individual pieces and try to like connect the dots in terms of signal chain or signal to noise ratio or any of those kind of like more scientific things for the idea of this podcast. I'm already getting scientific enough by just trying to look at some of the coloration and stuff and then doing some listening, some opinionated listening. But yeah, this is the mixer. Let's look at what it was doing with 100 hertz. So again, here is the original pure tone. You can see it's just a pure tone. Again, when you see the thing jump like that and there's like a little bit of a right there, that's because we have a loop that I'm just looping that tone, and you're getting essentially like a bit of noise, like from the loop back from starting at an imperfect spot. You're getting a bit of digital noise. So you will see that as we're going through this. Okay, so here it is. Look at that. I'm gonna artificially turn this up just so it magnifies the value here so we can see it. So fundamental tone at 100 hertz. Then we have a tone at 200 hertz. Looks like we have some additional tones being generated around here, which is 300 hertz. Another one around 400 hertz, right? So those fundamentals, right, that are being generated. So it looks like it's not really saturating in a way that's at least ideally that's generating a strong, even or odd harmonic. And then we have a bit of noise up here, which is 6,000 hertz. We have a bit of noise down here below, which could be, it's probably some of the floor noise or whatever. I'm just speculating. But you can see how it's colored the signal versus the pure signal, right? So there is color taking place, right? Okay. Let's do a quick look at 1,000 hertz and see what that looks like. So here is 1,000 hertz. Let me lower that because this is a little louder. We don't need it so pokey. So really interesting how like 1,000 hertz we have these pieces of coloration that are happening around really close to the tone, which looks like, is that just right next to a 900 to 1,000, right? 1,100. We have another one over here above it at 2,000, right? So there's the double, right? And then we'll probably have another one around 4,000. Yeah, so really interesting characteristically the difference of the two. But you can see it's not pure, right? It is being colored. But I wouldn't say that it's generating like a clear even or odd harmonic, so to speak. Okay, let's take a look at the next mixer, which is going to be the Rane 2016. Here's the Rane 2016 mixer. And for this shootout, the mixer is what we used. We did not test the optional processor that has the EQ, the crossfader, etc. So here is the 2016 that we tested, right? This guy here. Yeah, we used one of the channels. We did the thing. Again, diagrams, spec sheet, etc. It's all online. If you want to kind of do a comparison and nerd out on that, you certainly can. It wasn't for this podcast. So here is the 2016 tone. And look at that. That's a really... Isn't that funny how clean that is, right? Look how messy. Here on the left is the Empath. Here on the right is the 2016. Now, I mean, again, as I said before, like there could be a lot of things. It could be like, generally these are JV's mixers. JV keeps pretty good care of all this stuff, right? I don't recall if he said he bought the Empath new when it came out. He might have bought it used. I'm pretty sure he bought the 2016 used. He's had the 2016 for many years. But just look how like much cleaner the signal is here versus the signal over here. And I know this one is being boosted quite a bit so that we can just generally see the signal. But isn't that crazy how this really old mixer versus this newer mixer, new-ish mixer is the difference? And that might be a matter of like quality control of the parts, etc. But that's an interesting impact that might have on the quality of the music. Here it is at 1,000 hertz. Interesting how in 1,000 hertz it's generating more overtones, right? There's other stuff being added in 2,000 hertz. What is that, 4,000-ish? Yeah. No, it's around 5,000. So it's an odd. Interesting. And then we have one at around 7,000 hertz. So yeah, interesting versus the Empath. It's pretty interesting how like there's like cleaner overtones here that are being generated at 1,000 hertz versus we have what looks like the same, almost the same. No, there's a couple of overtones here that are different than over here. But see how noisy they are. I mean, and I'm just assuming that based on the fact that there's so many different points of tones that are coming through. Really interesting. All right. This is the one that everybody wants to see, in my opinion. And maybe not. Maybe it's not the one everybody wants to see. But this is like, at least when I grew up, this is the one everybody always would talk about. The Urei 1620. So here's the Urei that JV has. 1620. So let's take a look at the Urei's 100 hertz. Interesting how different. So you have that second, that fundamental, right? Then you got another guy here, right? 300 hertz. So nice and even. And then you got another guy that looks like it's poking out right here. It's probably a little bit. So interesting how that takes like an odd shift where it starts out as like kind of the fundamental and the overtones. So it's, again, like reasonably clean signal. Got some noise going on up here. So it's generating some interesting noise up here. It's also generating a bit of low end information down here in the subsonic region, which is like 20 hertz, 30 hertz and below. So really interesting there. Let's look at it at 1,000 hertz. Yeah, so reasonably less stuff going on than the low end generation in terms of like the amount of amplitude, especially like these closer harmonics, like it doubled the fundamental at 100 hertz. And it's interesting how it's just less loud than the next odd harmonic at 3,000. So pretty interesting. Let's look at, I don't know, the way people would talk about the Urei, I'd expect it to do all kinds of coloration. Let's look at a Rane MP24Z. This is not a commonplace mixer at all. Here's the Rane MP24Z. This is a mixer JV was telling me a personal story about, and how he used to love playing on this mixer. And so this guy, again, data sheets online if you want to check it out, especially for those of you who are like, I've never heard of this mixer. Let's look and see what this guy was doing with 100 hertz. Yeah, once again, doubling the fundamental at 200 hertz. It's got quite a bit of noise up top here. And that could just be it being old, any number of things, but relatively clean. It's crazy how these old mixers are so clean when we're always told how they would color the signal. But they're like much cleaner than the Rane Empath, which is considerably, it's considered like a more modern mixer comparatively. Let's look at 1,000 hertz, see what's going on. Yeah, I mean, very similar in a lot of ways to the Urei, right? Isn't that interesting? All right, another popular one. The E&S DJR 400, at least in the circles that I run in, super popular portable mixer. DJ Deep is a part of the conception. So it's got a lot of praise. You see it from time to time. I personally, I've never played a gig on one. They're cool mixers, but I have yet to ever see one out in the wild, or my friend or friends that have one. I've yet to see one that doesn't have an issue. Channels messed up or something's wrong with them. I'm not saying that they're made poorly, but I am saying I've never seen one 100% working, which is why if it's ever an option for me at a gig, as much as I would love to try and cut my teeth with one in a performance, I usually opt against it, because I already have to deal with the fact that I rarely get my own technical writer. So I'd rather deal with the broken shit that other people give me, that I use more often than something I don't use. I will tell you this though, the way it feels when I have messed with it a bit and how it sounds, it's very apparent that it's doing something to the music. It's very apparent that you're not getting a transparent sound out of it. It'll be interesting, at least in the ones that I've heard, okay? And maybe that's an analogous to the fact that there's always like a channel that's broken or something's weird with them. But it'll just be really interesting to see, based off of the one that I recorded from JV, what that actually is doing or what could be going on. Here is a picture of JV's. Really, yeah, I mean, it's a nice piece of equipment. If I had all the money in the world, I would absolutely buy one. Without a doubt, I would have one for sure. All right, so E&S. Yeah, it's coloring a bit. I mean, it's interesting because it's not a messy signal like the Empath is, but it's not as clean as like that Urei or the Rane. The Rane is so clean, but look at look at the low end generation. For example, if we look at the Rane here on the left versus the Rane here on the left versus the E&S on the right, the DJI 400 on the right. Look at that. It's quite a bit. Or like the Empath. Here's the Empath, which is super noisy, right? And it is generating a little bit of like some kind of rumble. But look at how much rumble is going on here with the E&S, right? Interesting. How about the Urei? Again, the Urei is generating a fair amount as well. Yeah, and if I was to boost, because I'm boosting the signal on the E&S, let's see, because I might have been looking at this unfairly. Ah, okay. But look, there's a more even order of operation with the harmonics as they tailor off. But there's still like just quite a bit of low end being generated there. Yeah, the Urei as well. Interesting. Let's look at 1,000 hertz. Let's look at 1,000 hertz from the E&S. Yeah, that's interesting how like there's not, we see like the little peaks that are like even, that kind of like pop up on each side, undertone, overtone of those cycles that aren't appearing on the E&S. Like if we pop up the Urei, take a look. See how the Urei's kind of got like these even spires that we're seeing in almost every mixer at 1,000 hertz. And this guy's got like a really interesting, what is that tone right there? It's around 700 hertz. It's like an uneven tone under the fundamental. Interesting. Yeah, and a lot more going on in terms of overtones. Yeah, really interesting. I mean, out of all the mixers when I was listening back, there were 3 mixers that it was very obvious had their own sound to them. And I'll save my opinion after I listen back with you guys, but we're making our way here. Here's the 900 Nexus. Oh, pretty noisy as well. 900 Nexus is super noisy, right? Nice little overtone here. The fundamental, just doubling the fundamental. Here we are at 1,000 hertz. Interesting, it's like the opposite of the E&S. You have the peak on this side, but the overtone's not there. At least not at the same volume. But look at it, it's not really generating any overtones. It's much cleaner up here. I always associate like the top end on a 900 Nexus to be quite harsh. But maybe that's because there's not a lot going on down here to warm up the signal. You know, my perception. I've played a lot on a 900 Nexus too through the years. Here's my baby, the Euphonia. Look at those. These are, yep, duplicates. That should be 300. Yep. So these are standard. And then here we start to go into 500, which from the fundamental looks like it's 100 hertz is like A flat or G sharp. And then we have essentially the third, right? So there's some of that odd order harmonic taking place up here at 500 hertz, which would be around like a B flat, or I'm sorry, a B, not a B flat. Pretty interesting. So that's a bit of that aggression that ChatGPT told us about, right? And then they tailor off as well. But look at a bit of noise, bit of that low end coming in, right? I don't know if that's good or bad. Probably not great. And then up here, interesting how the first real big harmonic is 3,000 from 1,000, right? So 3,000 in that world from 1,000, that's essentially putting us like 1,000 hertz is essentially like a B, and that 3,000 hertz is like an F sharp. So that's like a fifth, right? So there again, there's that odd order harmonic, that aggression, that like characteristic of something being a little bit more aggressive, which makes sense because the Euphonia, we didn't even look at the 900 Nexus. The Euphonia, the big characteristic here, where am I at in this world of Euphonia? The big characteristic here is that it has this Neve circuit. Transformers by Rupert Neve Design, right? So it's got this transformer circuit that it's passing through, which, as we learned from ChatGPT, that running through these transistors, we can end up with these more aggressive sounds, right? And this is kind of like, from what I understand, at least in the mass market, this is like a new style of mixer that's has like this digital conversion that is still making use of a signal being processed by either a transistor, or, you could probably do tube. You could probably do anything with this kind of signal flow. So like on this mixer, similar to like some other analog mixers where you start to drive the signal or clip the signal or what have you, you start to get like a more color, the more amplification you kind of put through the signal flow. With this guy, it's similar to where once you start to drive into this area that's closer towards what would essentially be like the clip of the transistor, you get more coloration. And I can attest to that regardless of what is actually happening, which we're seeing a little bit of. It's, this odd order harmonic that's getting added in, a fifth or a third or what have you, away from the fundamental. You're starting to hear that characteristic in the sound. And I play on this mixer. The only mixer I played on more than this mixer in terms of total hours would be maybe a tie between a Rane Empath Rotary and a 900 Nexus 2. Just because I played on 900 Nexus 2s so many times for so many years. I borrowed one for a year to kind of learn the Pioneer stuff. But I played on a Rane Empath for probably a decade just recording mixes. And then I own one of these the last couple of years. And my life working in some capacity as like quote unquote professional DJ, I put a lot of hours by my personal mixer as well as my tech writer when I can sometimes randomly get it to play out now on it. So really interesting. Here we move into the ever so popular, the beefy boy, the V10, right? So the V10 is like the next generation advancement of, if we went from like the 900 Nexus to an A9, which is kind of, in my opinion, kind of like the next step up with the new toys, the new advancements, in my opinion, a new signal path as well. I wish JV had an A9, but he only has so many mixers. But I have a feeling like it's very similar, maybe could be very similar to the V10, maybe not. But the V10's like that next step up, super beefy. Besides all the bells and whistles and signal path stuff, the one thing it has is it has a compressor. And I actually did two tests. I did one test with the compressor and one test without the compressor. But here's the V10 with no compression applied. It's pretty clean. Pretty freaking clean. And it's kind of what, I met the owner of the Varia. Yeah, I met 1 year in Detroit. I met one of the founders. I met this gentleman here, Simon and Marcel. I think I had met Simon. It was this gentleman. I met him in Detroit, and we were talking about this mixer here because my friend has this mixer. My friend Ochanade has this mixer, and he loves it. And I asked him, I said, what's the secret sauce like? I asked him, is there like a circuit that you drive into, and, are you trying to, color it in a certain way, et cetera, et cetera? And he said, no, actually the very opposite. We try to make the signal as clean as possible so that the song sounds the most like the sound the song should sound. And any coloration that would be taking place is a fact of after the mixer, meaning their thought process was the mixer should not color the sound. The system, the amplifiers, the DSP, etc., should color the sound or deliver the sound. However, the mixer should try to do the opposite, which I thought was interesting because, again, all my life I've been told about these old school or these analog mixers, and they're the best and the least amount of, the most color, and they're the most warm, and they're the most this, and they're the most that, like the way they treat the sound, where these guys are like, nah. We're just going to be clear as day. Unfortunately, I didn't get to test that, but that's okay. The Pioneer V10 seems pretty clear. Like it's really not generating any tones, right? Any harmonics. Let's look at 1,000 hertz. Wow. That's by far in those ranges that we hear well. I mean, it's super clear. Really interesting. I mean, here's the test track. Obviously, we have some noise here, like floor noise or whatever. But actually, if I'm boosting that, so if I take that away, I was boosting the volume so we could see it better on the graph. But if I take that away, it's like very little noise. I mean, you're not hearing that. It's less than negative 90 dBFS. So clean. That's really surprising. And then I ran the test again, but I took, I think it was this song. I can't remember if it was this song or this song, but I kind of dialed in the compression to the point where I was like, that's good. Like, it's like, this is how, like, if I was playing this song on this mixer at a club, I would have dialed in the compression to that point for this song if it was the way it was. And then I ran the whole test like that. So it's not the most, like, again, scientific way to do shit, but I basically set the compressor and then I reran the whole thing across everything. And for those curious how much compression I used, I did take a picture. Here we go. So that's how much compression I used. Not a ton, but not one dot, not 2 dots, almost 3 dots. So not like a ton, but the dots were there. They were definitely there. Interesting. Still really clean at 100. Super clean. Wow, look how transparent that is. So crazy. All right, so let's do some testing. Let's take a look. Let's do some A/B. We'll start with the Rane Empath.
Never felt this way before. It made me feel like I'm so alive. See the way you look at me, I can feel my freedom in your eyes. Moving through the air, flying around my head like butterflies.
All right, my first general thoughts. I won't spend a ton of time on each one of these because we have a lot of mixers to listen to, but my general thoughts, the green here is going to be the test track. The blue is going to be the mixer that we're comparing against. Test track meaning the digital recording of the track as if for the file. So this file got ran through. Literally, we're listening to the file pure. They got ran through each of the mixers. The Rane sounds darker. It sounds a bit messier. The transient information, especially in the top end, is being subdued quite a bit. It sounds less clear, right? There's a warmer characteristic to it, but I wouldn't necessarily, in my personal opinion, I wouldn't necessarily classify it as a nice characteristic. It doesn't feel like the warmth is adding to the sound whatsoever. That's just my take. Let's listen to the more compressed track with the vocal now and see how it sounds.
You can use me. Use your hands, yeah. You can use my voice. Shine, let my light shine. Let my light shine. Let my light shine. Use my hands, yeah. Let my hands, you can use. Let my light shine. Use my voice. Let my light shine. Let my light shine.
So my general impressions are similar to the last track, but not quite as egregious. So the transient information does feel like it's a bit subdued, and it does feel generally warmer, but characteristically, it doesn't feel as impactful. And maybe it's because the compression, the perceived idea of everything being louder in general, feels better. But I would say, like, characteristically, if I could describe it so far, especially because of the vocal, feels like there's like a sheet being placed on top of the track. Like, not a heavy blanket, but a sheet that just like covers it just enough to where it's noticeable. Okay, let's go with the the less compressed or unlimited instrumental tune. Really interesting, like very similar feeling to the uncompressed vocal track, where you can feel the muffling. This one, I wouldn't call it a sheet, but I almost feel like it's like a mute. Like there's a bit of muting taking place on the top, but then there's definitely accentuation or something that's enhancing. I'm gonna say that's like 3,000 hertz, 3 or 4,000 hertz. Maybe no, it's around 3 or 4,000 hertz. It's like there's a bit of like this top that's kind of coming off of it, but then there's an accentuation. I can really hear it in the snare because the snare literally is changing its timbre to a degree. Like it sounds like not a completely different snare, but it sounds like a fucking different snare. Just listen to that really quick. right? It's like kind of honky versus anyways. Okay, let's go with the last electronic tune, compressed, limited, and let's see how it sounds. Yeah, similar story. It's like the more compressed, it's like a light blanket. It's definitely, it's doing a little bit of this, but it's not so honky like the uncompressed material. Transient stuff is being severely crushed, in my opinion. Like the pop of the kick, the tits of the tits on the hats. Yeah, really interesting. Quite a bit of signal disparity, and in my opinion, not the most musical disparity. Doesn't color it and doesn't change it in a way that I find attractive. All right, let's do same thing, but let's go with the Rane 2016.
So alive. See the way you look at me, I can feel my freedom in your eyes. Love is moving through the air, flying around my head like butterflies. Something coming over me like static through my body, electrified.
Wow, how drastically different compared to the Empath, right? I hear a bit of high end attenuation, so it's definitely there's some high end attenuation there, and there's definitely some reshaping around the mid range, but it's not crazy. It's definitely there though. I mean, you can rewind the tape and run it back for yourself. But one thing that's super drastic comparatively to what we just heard with the Empath, I feel like the transient information stays intact. Like the kick still punches the same way, the top end, the sizzles and the different things, like it sounds like it's all there still for the most part. Really interesting. Let's go ahead and check out the more compressed vocal tune.
You can use me. Use my hands, yeah. You can use my voice. Shine, let my light shine. Let my light shine. Let my light shine. Let my light use my hands, yeah. Let my light.
Interesting. Like, again, I mean, I have a similar feeling where there's like a bit of reshaping kind of in that mid range and I would say upper mid range. And then there's definitely feels like attenuation. I think with the compression, it becomes a little bit more obvious in this song, maybe also the sound design, but it feels like the attenuation is more in the air. So I would say like north of 8,000, 10,000 hertz. Unless psychoacoustically I'm hearing, unless it's falling a little bit lower, maybe at least like the lowest 6,000 hertz or something. I'm going to open up my tonal balance meter. So what we're looking at here is a balance curve. I'm not going to go into great detail about this, but essentially it's a tool that measures amplitude of frequency ranges against each other, and it applies a general curve. There's different genres of music, etc., that you can have that will necessarily fit into a balance curve that's more representative of that genre according to what you hear as a standard practice. But I'm just going to use this really quick to measure the Rane versus the original tune, just to see if I can see attenuation taking place or reshaping taking place. Yeah, so you can see that there's a bit more amplitude in the upper mid-range area. And then there is attenuation, in the air frequencies. Like, to me, I hear like the air. So it really starts to taper off around like 11,000 hertz. Versus there's a lot more information. I know it's like we're not zoomed in enough to like really see major differences. But you can see like the mid-range is being treated differently. Let this shape out a bit. You can see the mid-range. If you look at these two sections, you can see the way that they're being treated differently, and how the fall off, there's more attenuation in the fall off with the air frequencies, that's that bit of, it's that ambiance that I'm losing a bit through the Rane. Again, the Rane's on the left, the test track's on the right. I mean, I don't want to do this with every track, but it's like I could hear it, and I'm kind of wondering, like, it's not drastic, but it's enough to, like, to hear. Okay, let's keep the tests moving, shall we? So let's go ahead and rock with the less compressed electronic tune. Really interesting there, because sound design wise, there's less air in the original production. Like, there's less ambiance, right? There's less air. So it's not, at least to my ears, it's not obviously affected as great. When you start to hear some of these synths and these other sounds that are coming in here, you can hear it more because there's more of those, there's more value in the air range above 8,000, 10,000 hertz. The reshaping of the mid-range, I can still hear. It's now something that's like imprinted characteristically on the recording of this mixer. Like, I hear it, and if you're not hearing it, that's okay. But pretty even. I would say, like, it's not like changing the song, right? Like, the Empath really like changed shit up. You know what I mean? Okay, let's go with the last one. It's more of the same story. Transient information sounds like it's there. It doesn't sound like it's being like crazy reshaped or in one way or another. There's a very light bit of attenuation, a bit of upper mid-range kind of reshaping, but it sounds like the song. Like, it's quite transparent. Really fucking cool. Really fucking cool. That's an exciting one for me. I don't know why. It's fucking cool. It's just so, I guess after I didn't, the Empath, the coloration of the Empath was like so not musical in my opinion. So like the transparency was super nice. Okay, let's go with the Urei and see how the Urei's sounding.
I never felt this way before. It made me feel like I'm so alive. See the way you look at me, I can feel my freedom in your eyes. Love is moving through the air, flying around my head like butterflies. Something coming over me like static through my body, electrified.
Again, a little bit of like reshaping in the upper mid range. I'm assuming that's like just some saturation. But transient information's there. I'll listen a little bit more closely on the subsonics with some of the other tunes, especially this next one's got like a lot of sub in lingering in the bass line. But yeah, and a little bit of attenuation on the top, similar to the Rane. Yeah, it's fucking pretty nice. Pretty nice. I mean, it's like there's a transparency there. I wouldn't say like musically it's doing something where I'm like, oh yeah, like that really enhanced the song. You know what I'm saying? Like it's like the way I expect the Urei with the shit people have talked through the last 20 plus years of me hearing about this mixer. Like, I don't know. I would expect it to like make shit sound like butterflies and rainbows are flying out of my tune here. And it just really changed it up. But I think maybe the opposite is that like the transparency is key and it's preserving the value of the intention with the song, which is, I guess, in a lot of ways, you know, the butterfly isn't running into any fucking glass windows. It's just flying free. How's that for a metaphor for your ass? Okay, let's go to the next song. I'm going to listen to low end more carefully on this one.
You can use me. Use my hands, yeah. You can use my voice. Oh, shine, let my light shine, let my light shine, let my light shine.
Yeah, I mean, maybe because of where the harmonic value is in this song, I feel like there's maybe even less obvious shaping. Low end wise, sounded pretty, I mean, like subsonic, like the feel of it. Yeah, maybe a little less amplitude, like really, really low, but not enough to where I would complain about the fact that the mixer does something to the low end that's fucked up. So pretty cool. Okay, let's keep it moving. I'm not gonna lie. I actually almost, it has a little bit of a honkiness to it. The Urei is like the way it's shaping, because it's like obviously coloring in somewhere in that telephonic region, 1000 hertz, 3000 hertz. It's doing something there. And there's a little bit of top end attenuation, but again, like as we already established from listening to other mixers, this song has a bit of a less of an impact in the top end attenuation, because it's got more like, most totals of the sounds are more lo-fi in the fact that they don't have as much air in them above 8000 hertz. So it already feels, the sonic idea compositionally is already a little bit more contained in that way. So you're not hearing the impact of the mixer. But I would say like, what I'm really surprised about is like dynamically, somehow the track feels like it bounces harder. And maybe that's because it's maybe a psychoacoustic effect, the fact that it's coloring something in the telephonic region. And because of the way that the groove is composed, it feels like that thing punches when those particular sounds have more, rhythm or trance. Like it's like when those things occur, it feels like a push. I'm just listening like really quick one more time, like really listen to like groove and like the breath of the groove. Am I tripping? I think I know what it is. In the subsonic region, there is maybe some masking that's taking place when the sub hits on that one note where the sub sustains a little bit. And I think maybe whatever harmonic is being added is causing a bit of masking. So you end up with like a less obvious transient on the next kick that happens while that sub is going. So it feels like it's like there's a dynamic value of the kick getting lower, and then when the other kick comes in, it has more of an impact because it's louder. Where in the original tune, you're not missing the impact of the kick. Like nothing's masking that point. Really interesting because that obviously changes the feel of the track a bit. Is it better? Maybe. It's definitely not the way I composed the track to be, but that teaches me something, right? It's like, rather than have a consistent power with that note, what if that quarter note kick had less power? Like how cool could that feel? So a learning lesson. Urei, all that shit talking from all these old heads, and here your old ass is teaching me something fucking funny. Okay, let's go. Yeah, it's like there's a mid-range saturation taking place. It's more focused. It's more focused. It's a bit more telephonic. I'll just talk my shit. I could see why old heads would like that because they don't hear as good. I mean, I'm not an old head. I'm not a young head. I don't hear as good as young heads. My ears are pretty good. I mean, they're definitely more trained, but like the telephonic regions, those regions of information between like 1000 hertz to 34,000 hertz, we consider that like a telephonic region. So like you think like old school telephones, for those of you who remember those old school telephones, they would be shaped in a way that was their EQ curve would be shaped in a bandpass way where like these frequencies were accentuated. As a result, they sound loud and clear. So telephonic. When those frequencies are accentuated, yeah, so it's definitely doing that. And this is why I said old heads might like it, because things feel like more impactful if they're heard better. So especially on old like disco cuts or, you know, rock or whatever, like there's so much mid-range drive, horns, guitars, etc. That stuff gets colored not a lot, but it gets colored here. My verdict on the Urei 1620, which again is in my history has always been such a important mixer, it sounds good. All right, so let's go with the Rane MP. Let's see how she sounds.
Never felt this way before. You made me feel like I'm so alive. See the way you look at me, I can feel my freedom in your eyes. Love is moving through the air, flying around my head like butterflies. Something coming over me like static through my body, electrified.
So similar to almost all the mixers, there's a bit of air attenuation. So you're not getting as much of that stuff above 10K. This one feels like there's not quite as much mid-range color going on. There's maybe a little bit, but I would say like versus the Urei or the 2016, there's definitely some transient suffrage. It's maybe more so. I mean, I was trying to listen against the kick too to see if like even the kick was suffering a bit from transient dilution or smearing or something. But yeah, I don't know. There's just a bit of like the life taken out of the transient value. Let's listen to some compressed shit and see how it sounds.
You can use me. Use my hands, yeah. You can use my voice. Shine, let my light shine. Let my light shine. Let my light shine. Use my hands, yeah. Let my light.
Yeah, so definitely, you know what else it could be too? That the level balance isn't even. So the right channel is a little louder than the left channel. So that might be a psychoacoustic effect of like taking out my feelings around the transients. Now, I could obviously correct that with the balance here in Logic, but because it's recorded like this, well, first off, I didn't want to change it. But second off, I don't know if that would really correct exactly what's happening. There's probably more to look into with regards to if the balance is recorded like that, how is the linearity of the recording impacted if I was to try and correct it? Would that change the transient or would it just set it back? Because, for example, like this peak may be shaped differently in the right channel than the left channel as a result of like its imbalance. I don't know. I could be just talking out my ass a bit, but let's keep it moving. Yeah, there's some reshaping there. You can really hear it on that synth. Obviously, again, the top is being attenuated. We don't hear it as much in that song until that synth kind of comes in. But, you know, overall, I wouldn't say it's enhancing the song. Yeah, it's not enhancing it, but I wouldn't say it's like horrible. I mean, the fact that we just heard the 1620 and the 2016 just like really surprisingly felt very good. There's definitely a bit of a little bit of a loss if I could just like summarize it a bit with this mixer, or at least the recording of this particular mixer at this time. Let's go with the last tune. More of the same story. And this song, especially comparatively with listening to like the compressed state of the low end, there's like less power, but that's because of the shift of the balance. There's more power in one speaker than the other. So you're not getting equal power to my sub. Verdict. Yeah, it sounds okay. It's not bad. It's not great. Let's go. Oh, here we go. The E&S. The E&S. And now, this is the first of 3 mixers when I was recording that I was like, oh, this is changing the sound of the music. So here's the first of 3. You'll find out the other 3, at least when I was listening. So hopefully this will be obvious and I'm not just, putting my foot in my mouth. Let's listen to things and see how it sounds.
Never felt this way before. You make me feel like I'm so alive. See the way you look at me, I can feel my freedom in your eyes. Love is moving through the air, flying around my head like butterflies. Something coming over me like static through my body, electrified.
Interesting. At least in this song, this mixer, the very top still feels like it has air. Doesn't feel like it's attenuated a little bit, but like maybe it's attenuated, but maybe there's like noise. That's the first mixer that I feel is keeping the air closer. We'll listen to the other ones. Things feel thicker and richer, but not necessarily more clear on the bottom end. Feels like there's a lot of like if we were working, just a metaphor, if we were working with runny pancakes, they put more pancake mix in the DGR 400. You know what I mean? Like it thickened it up. I wouldn't necessarily say for at least the material we were just listening to, that made it better. But I would say like generally I'm like, okay, like there was, and the mid-range didn't get like, in my opinion, didn't really get like reshaped a whole bunch. And if it did, it's not like it changed the timbre of things. It's like everything kind of felt like it needed to be there. It's still, everything that was there is still more or less there, but we got like a thicker pancake mix, so to speak. Transients and everything all still there. So really, really interesting. Okay, let's go with the next song. Now we're going to deal with some compressed material. So this ought to be interesting to see what goes on.
You can use me. Use my hands, yeah. You can use my voice. Shine, let my light shine. Let my light shine. Let my light shine. Let my light use my hands, yeah. Let my light you can use. Let my light shine. Use my voice.
Very obvious frequency masking taking place. The mid-range, and again, this is why I wanted to do a vocal sample versus non-vocal sample, because your ear can hear those vocal changes so much more, but so much more nuanced than other things. My assumption is that the low end is being reshaped so much, or it's being saturated in such a way that it's causing those upwards frequency masks to cast shadows towards the focal of the mid-range where the vocal sits. Listen again. Listen to the vocal specifically. Just listen to the vocal.
Use my hands, yeah. You can use my voice. Shine, let my light shine. Let my light shine. Let my light shine. Let my light use my hands, yeah. Let my light you can use. Let my light shine. Use my voice.
Listen to that part right there. Use my voice. That run. Listen to that.
You can use. Let my light shine. Use my voice.
It's not like detrimental, but the effect of it definitely sounds. But here's the thing. Is it horrible? No, it's definitely not horrible. But I mean, I would imagine if the mix balance was like centered differently and it was like really, like bass wise was really heavy, that extra saturation would be very muddy feeling potentially with the E&S. But all the other stuff that's important is still there, similar to like what we got with the 1620 in the 2016. It's like transient value, but more air. This is the first mixer that's, I feel like, preserving the air better. All right, let's move on to that lo-fi sound and tune, or lo-fi-ish the sound design tune. You know what? Maybe it's not as much frequency masking as I speculated. There's definitely a little bit of mid-range reshaping where there's a boost, sounds like lower down in the mid-range than the upper telephonic regions. And as a result, maybe that's a psychoacoustic. It could be psychoacoustic in terms of frequency masking where we just don't hear that stuff. But I can really hear it like on the backbeat hit. Sounds good though. Sounds good. Let's go with the last tune. I'm noticing that a bit of the punch gets taken out in this tune, and that might be some low end enhancement that takes away from like the 120, 200 hertz knock of the kick. It sounds pretty good though. Did it enhance it? I don't know, but it sounds good. It's not transparent, but it definitely colored it. Did it make it better? Maybe just different. I mean, a lot of people talk a lot of shit about DJI 400 being like this, you know, this thing. Sounds good. All right, let's go with the 900 Nexus. Tried and true. The amount of times if you've been out in the club for a long time, the amount of times you heard people play on this mixer. All right, let's see how she sounds.
Never felt this way before. It made me feel like I'm so alive. See the way you look at me, I can feel my freedom in your eyes. Love is moving through the air, flying around my head like butterflies. Something coming over me like static through my body, electrified.
So some high-end attenuation, not as drastic as like some of the older mixers, but it's there. And maybe this is what I always associated with things being a bit harsh. The transient, especially as the closer you get to the top, the transient information kind of disappears. It feels washed, if that makes any sense. Let's see how the next song sounds.
You can use my hands, yeah. You can use my voice. Shine, let my light shine. Let my light shine. Let my light shine.
Yeah, it feels flat. It feels flat. Like there's transient stuff that sometimes feels like it blurs into other stuff. There's not as much air, obviously, like it somehow doesn't preserve. It just feels, it feels like it's being processed and kind of restricted. It's like, yeah, it sounds like the song, but it's like there's a feeling of like power I don't know. There's something musical that gets dialed back. Like if there's a knob, and let's say you turn that knob to 12, and 12 is max, right? 6 is off, 12 is max. You turn that knob to 12, and that's musical. That's the original material, let's say. It feels like you turn the knob to like 9 o'clock. It didn't ruin the song, but it shaved off enough of the identity where, you know, turning that shit to 6 o'clock would be like, wow, you really stepped on my song. 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, it's still there, but it feels musically flat. What a trip. Maybe that's the like digital conversion. I don't fucking know. It's definitely, again, non-scientific, but how I'm hearing things, you know, opinionated. Next song. Yeah, I mean, doesn't feel as flat as the last song. Like it definitely isn't as drastic, but you can hear the attenuation. Maybe this is why people always would turn the knobs so aggressively in the highs and the mid, especially the highs. I'd see a lot of people crank highs, crank mids, because they're looking for that focus again that maybe they're not hearing from the mixer. I don't know. Like, also people do wild shit in the DJ booth, but let's listen to this last compressed one and see if we get that feeling with all that volume if we're being stripped again. Yeah, it's similar. It's not as bad as the other song that had so much sub and like sustaining sub in the bass, so much upper like tear out mid range from the bass too. It's nowhere near as flat sounding, but it just like it feels like the upper mid range and tops, those like focus and the stuff that makes things feel alive and bright, and you know, where a lot of like faster transient focuses. It feels like someone gave it a box fade. Like the hair was growing and they just like coop and then squared off the top. That's what it feels like. Just box fade to the music. Sound bad? I would say so far, it's the second worst sounding mixer. The Rane Empath was probably the worst. Okay, the Euphonia, my baby. This is my baby. I love the Euphonia. Maybe at the end I'll do my my little wrap up session that has nothing to do with sound. I know this is a long podcast, but this is what people pay the big dollars for. Okay, this level of deep dive and research and taking the time, and I knew this was going to be a long one, and this is something that, you know, if I wasn't hanging out with y'all digitally doing this, I would almost never be able to make time for it because my life is too crazy. So this is a commercial break to shout out my Patreon fam for being able to make this kind of thing happen, because this is the fun stuff that I can't afford time in my life to do. And because of folks like you at patreon.com/Coflo, you're making this happen for me. So I appreciate it. All right, let's listen to the Euphonia.
Before you made me feel like I'm so alive. See the way you look at me, I can feel my freedom in your eyes. Love is moving through the air, flying around my head like butterflies. Something coming over me like static through my body, electrified.
I'm obviously biased, but you can go back and listen to that. There is some top end attenuation. Not, I would say that maybe the DJR preserves it a little bit better, but maybe they're on par with each other. Maybe I'll do a quick listen to try and compare them. Also, this is the second of 3 mixers, and we only have 1 mixer left, so you can guess what the third mixer is. That when playing live in the room, just recording, you could hear the mixer was doing something. It was very obvious. Like there is I don't want to call it an enhancement, but there was a change. It was the E&S, the Euphonia, and the V10. So you can hear, I can really hear the aggressiveness of the mid-range. It's changed. At least you can really hear it in the vocal. It's changed. And it's at a point where it's like, was that okay? And then the minute the kick drum with like the really more intensified subsonic comes in, you can hear how there is more, again, similar to the E&S, there's like more batter in the mix, which lifts itself to lend to the aggressiveness of the mid-range. It's like if things become too mid-range forward, it feels a bit, it can feel like a bit honky in some cases, depending on where the mid-range is, boxy. And so the low end, having more low end will warm up what feels boxy, and it just ends up feeling like the combination of the two ends up feeling powerful. It's like powerful focus on the mid-range, powerful enrichment of the lower range and the low mid. And then there's not a ton of attenuation on the top end. So we're still getting air still exists. The air still exists in the change of the sound. Lastly, I would say there is I don't want to assume. I want to listen to the material compressed and then see if my tune still stays the same. But you can really hear the reshaping of it in a way that feels good. And the transients feel like they stay intact. But it's going to be interesting now because those changes on something that's way more compressed might be it might be over the top. It might be muddy or too flat. It'll be interesting to see if the transients hold up with all the compression.
You can use me. Use my hands, yeah. You can use
Definitely some attenuation. Like you can definitely hear it's not like preserving things crystal clear in terms of like the top end. I think maybe the DJR is doing we'll AB, but maybe it's doing a better job of preserving the top end. But the mid range focus, it is reshaping. Is it drastic? It's drastic enough to where it's noticeable, but like rather than us getting the masking that I felt like was occurring in the DJR, the aggressiveness, which we kind of identified as what probably was an odd order harmonic as a result of, that Neve circuit, it's like given just enough to where that stuff really cuts, even though all the bottom is really being lifted in terms of thickening and pushing it up. We might be losing a little bit of the punch, so to speak, with this particular song. But is it enough for me to be like, oh, it's all fucked up? No, like I'm actually really surprised at how all that holds up with all that compression. Okay, moving on to the more lo-fi, less compressed sound. Funny with this song, it really, because it's already doesn't have like that top end to help us figure out space, because I say lo-fi, it's not lo-fi. There's plenty of information up top. It's just not egregiously, there's not a lot of air like some of the other tunes. The focus in the mid-range becomes more powerful. It's really interesting. I would say that this track in its state right now is the first time where we have a mixer that I feel actually enhances the way that song feels. It enhances like, oh, it obviously made it better. No, like it actually gave me a different flavor that I'm like, oh, this is actually nice. Musically, it's nice. I'm not saying like the Urei sounded great. The 2016 sounded great. Yeah, there's a little bit of attenuation, but I loved the way they sounded. The E&S sounded good. It's just like, I don't think it colored it to where I was like, oh yeah, like that's an enhancement that I'll take. Like, it's kind of like, I don't know. I kind of want a buffalo burger, but I also kind of want a chicken sandwich. They're not the same, but I'm ordering, and it's like they both sound good to me. All right, so let's go with this last tune here. So interesting. On this one, I feel like I like the enhancement in the extension of the low end. Like I would say it's probably in the 200 hertz range, 200 to 300 hertz, maybe 400 hertz tops. There's like definitely more there. The bass line in this song is just like this tom from a Roland, like a Roland sample that I had on this TRAS years ago. And or maybe it was a year and a half ago. That was about almost 2 years ago. so it's kind of like this pitched thing that I just kind of like played. It's not moving around. It's just this bong, bong, bong like thing. And the extension of it, it's more of like a tone, and it's like a compositional idea of sound in the song. And then the Euphonia is kind of lifting, because it's meant to be like a bass line, but there's no real bass line. The Euphonia is kind of lifting it and turning it into something that carries more weight, which is kind of nice. But the mid-range focus in this feels a bit too aggressive, like compared to how the original sounds. So it's like, I like kind of what it did to the low mid, but I don't like as much as what it did to the upper mid. I think loud, the whole thing's going to sound really, it's going to be like, yeah. But I mean, is it better musically? It's like kind of más menos, right? It's like sort of, kind of, not really, but yeah. But interesting. All right. Let's go to the Pioneer. I'll take like the Pioneer, the Euphonia, and the E&S, and I'll just do some A/B because I think they'd be worth it. But let's look at the Pioneer again. The Pioneer was the other mixer beside, not even using the compressor. It just sounded like it did something. So let's see if I'm hallucinating when I was recording it.
Before you made me feel like I'm so alive. See the way you look at me, I can feel my freedom in your eyes. Love is moving through the air, flying around my head like butterflies. Something coming over me like static through my body, electrified.
You know what's funny is I kind of wonder if what I thought the mixer was doing when I heard it was the fact that it was like the only mixer out of all the ones I was listening to that was like super transparent. Like, it's unbelievably transparent. Let's just keep it moving, shall we? Let's keep it moving. Next song.
You can use me. Use my hands, yeah. You can use my voice. Shine, let my light shine. Let my light shine. Let my light shine. Use my hands, yeah. Let my light you can use.
There seems like there might be a little bit of mid-range focus, like something could be going on, but I mean, they're pretty close. Like, it's fairly transparent. Like, characteristically, it's transparent. It's really crazy. Like, low end feels pretty close to the same. Like, I'm not like, transient information's all there. The air, top end information is all there. It might be a little bit brighter feeling. And that's probably a result of like the noise floor. I mean, pretty crazy. Let's keep it going. I mean, that one's really hard to pick apart. It's transparent. Crazy. All right, last song. And then we'll move to the compressor. I feel like there's a bit of air attenuation in this. Like I can kind of hear maybe 6,000, 8,000, and then it kind of just ever so slightly, because it feels like things get a little more like ch versus ch a little bit, especially on those like snare clappy things. But I mean, pretty fucking transparent. Damn. All right. All right. The compressor. The compressor. Let's see how the compressor is vibing. Now we should hear a difference. We got to. We have to.
Way before, it made me feel like I'm so alive. See the way you look at me, I can feel my freedom in your eyes. Love is moving through the air, flying around my head like butterflies.
So I mean, obviously it's louder, so it's especially for I'm gonna keep going, but especially for folks that are not used to being music at volumes like I am all day, every day, and trying to draw opinions and train your ears against loud biasness. It's a single knob on a mixer. One knob that you turn up to compress the sound. Compressors are not one knob. This episode is not about compressors, and I mean, yeah, I'm qualified maybe to teach people that are brand new to engineering about compressors, but I'm not like the guy on compression. But it blows my mind, because I mean, I've played on this mixer out many times, and most of the time when I've had the chance to play on it in a really good setting, I don't always get the best booth, so I don't always hear clearly things going on with the act of using the compressor or not using the compressor on this mixer. So I can only assume the impact that it has on the sound system in the house or the front of the house or what have you. But this is all to say, this is one knob that does the job of like potentially on the most basic compressor, at least two knobs, at least like a trim versus like an input versus a peak attenuation at the very least. But most compressors are gonna have 1, 2, 3 knobs. I mean, obviously there's some of the things that it does automatically are not that mystifying to me, but it's like the fact that it's one knob and it's compressing in a way that I feel, especially with using it a little bit, I can hear immediately how musical it sounds. It's not like crazy. It's like the way it attacks, the compressor is attacking the sound, and the way it's releasing the sound at the ratio and the amount of volume that it's adding, the type of compression sounds actually pretty fucking musical to me. That is kind of crazy. Like, I'm not speaking, like, fair warning here. We have not talked about any DJ stuff. I haven't talked about the mixers themselves, playing on the mixers. I mean, maybe I mentioned some little anecdotes, but like, I haven't like talked about feature-rich stuff. I want to save that for the end monologue. But like, from a like engineer, guy who makes music, who really makes music day in and day out and uses these tools, compressors, all the time, it is really mind-boggling that in a live, improvised, almost performance-like capability, that there's a knob that you can twist that does this, and it does it this well. It's kind of crazy. So let's keep it moving. Let's keep it moving.
Something coming over me like static through my body, electrified.
You might be wondering why I'm so amazed. There's so much low end. Like the way I mix this track, that kick is like overtly too loud, because the way this whole track is arranged, the A parts and the B parts and the C parts, like I wanted the kick in the full-time tempo to be like way too aggressively forward, because I just imagine how the impact is on a proper sound system that can carry the weight of that kick. Especially the way that I've actually ended up mastering this track. The fact that it like musically holds up and it doesn't just like squash the kick to nothing when it's not there, and then the kick is there and it's like it's in an instant. There's no delay in the compression. The compression's not over here like trying to figure out where it should be. That's kind of crazy. It's kind of crazy. Pioneer should release a plugin for like a mix bus one knob compressor. I would buy it. Let's go to the next song.
You can use my hands, yeah. You can use my voice. Shine, let my light shine. Let my light shine. Let my light shine. Use my hands, yeah. Let my light you can use. Let my light shine. Use my voice.
Okay, so this is where things get a little bit dangerous, but I'm fucking surprised. It's continuing to surprise me. So it does sound a bit overcompressed to me. Obviously the song is already limited and compressed, so we're adding more compression to it. So we're like attenuating stuff that's already been attenuated, and it's already plenty loud, and already has plenty of, in my opinion, the right amount of dynamic control, what have you. It's crazy to me because it doesn't completely fall apart. Yes, it sounds overcompressed, but it doesn't sound distorted and overcompressed. It just sounds a bit too flat. And in the landscape of loud music and a loud environment for long periods of time, it's not great to have no dynamic change. That's just my opinion. I like when music changes dynamically, especially over a set of dance tunes. I like when some songs are a bit more dynamic or quiet or loud, and some are more abrasive and aggressive, whatever. It sounds overcompressed, but it doesn't sound destroyed. Like if someone gave me this back at that master, I would probably be like, it's a bit too loud. Let's see what it sounds like with less compression. But I'm not like, you fucked it up. It's not as surprising as how it's treating the dynamic material, but it's almost as surprising. Like if I would have started with this song, I would have been like, yo, this is actually doing a good job considering it probably could fuck it all up. All right, let's go on to an uncompressed tune again. How powerful is that? It sounds great. It sounds like the song, but it sounds like there's some limiting compression. Nice attenuation, transparent. It sounds good. It sounds good. I kind of wonder if like that's what it is. Like they have like a hyper aggressive, really like safe, meaning it's a relatively fast attack, relatively fast release, limiter, like a 10-to-1 type of limiter, or maybe as you increase it, that changes, the ratios change. Maybe there's documentation about this and I need to look into it. It'd be interesting to see how that compressor is designed. It sounds great. Okay, last tune. This is the one where, especially in the mid-range, I think as things get really loud, it could feel really aggressive. So let's see how it does. Sounds good. It doesn't sound as overcompressed as the other tune. Sounds a little bit more flat, but not by much. I mean, I set it on this tune here at the beginning, and then I just let that knob run through the whole thing. I didn't change the settings. You would never do that in real life. In real life, as you're playing the tune or listening, you'd be making that adjustment like you would with any other knob on the mixer. Unless, I'll say it because I've put in a lot of practice now. I don't still consider myself like DJ, but you're a putz if you don't touch the knobs. You just should be touching them in a musical way. And if not, then you're fulfilling a different role and you're in a different world than I am, and that's okay. We all can play in different sandboxes. Fuck, dude, it sounds great. Let me do my comparison before final thoughts between the V10, the Euphonia, and the E&S. I don't even know it's worth comparing the V10 because it sounds so much more just like the original material. Your comparison is like, I don't want to say apples and oranges, but it's like it's not coloring. It's not coloring. So it's like, I guess really I should just be comparing these two. Let's do that again, but let's just listen to the E&S versus the Euphonia. So the E&S will be in purple, Euphonia will be in blue.
I never felt this way before. You make me feel like I'm so alive. See the way you look at me, I can feel my freedom in your eyes. Love is moving through the air, flying around my head like butterflies. Something coming over me like static through my body, electrified.
So I can hear like the mid-range like focus on the Euphonia. They both carry the same amount of weight, which is nice. It's not like one one's like more beefy than the other. They both feel like they're heavy, but I feel like the mid-range focus is quite a nice change in the Euphonia. I also swear that the E&S had preserved more of like the air, but I'm not quite sure it does. Like it almost feels like the Euphonia is doing a better job. Let's listen to the compressed material and see if that's the case.
You can use my hands, yeah. You can use my voice. Shine, let my light shine. Let my light shine. Let my light shine.
No, I think they're about the same. I mean, the ENS might be preserving more of the air, but it's just because there's so much more of a mid-range saturation on the Euphonia. And I almost like the balance better on the ENS for this particular song. But I will tell you that it is nice that the vocal pushes so much farther forward. I'm just like that kind of guy where like I want like a mid-range focus. And again, maybe that's me becoming an old fart where, you know, I want to be able to hear things with more intentionality in those like regions that the human hears well. Like it just feels like it carries weight. I don't know. There's so much recorded music history before like modern day processing where mixed focuses, in my opinion, were always so mid-range focused. And then we lost our way when subsonics and compression and stuff came in, like limiting compression and loudness wars. Like I feel like we lost our way a bit with like having dynamic range with mid-range focused. Let's go to the third uncompressed tune. Yeah, this is a clear difference for me. The way the Euphonia is coloring this, again, because of that mid-range focus and the fact that it's lifting just like the ENS, not in the exact same way, but there is like a body that gets added to it, or at least from what I recall, listening back now 1,000 times. The Euphonia, like, it really does enhance this. It's really enhancing that. I do think that sounds better in general. Like it like I was making that comparison of a chicken sandwich or a beef burger. It's like, which one do I want to eat? Like it's comparatively to the ENS, like it feels like a better tune to me. Like the ENS just feels a bit too muddy. Let's listen to the last one. In comparison, not overall like it's a muddy mixer, just in comparison. With this one, I have a little bit of the opposite feeling. I feel like the ENS colors the song better than the Euphonia. I feel like the low end, I really like, and this, I was kind of mentioning this when we were listening to the Euphonia originally, this like extension of the low mid, like where that like this, the things that are supposed to take up the bass, they feel more intelligible and they feel like they serve a better purpose, not just a body or not just the tone, but they encompass both a body and a tone. Where the ENS, I feel like there's more weight than the original track, but the tone doesn't necessarily get enhanced. It just feels like it sits kind of like the original track in the low and low mid. But the upper mid focus, I feel like, is like comparatively, I feel like the Euphonia, how it's treated, feels more even, feels more musical, where this feels a little too in your face comparatively. So if I was to try to pick, I would mix the two. Like I would let the top half of the frequency spectrum go to the E&S, and I would take the bottom half of the frequency spectrum from the Euphonia in a perfect world. Cool. So there's so many more things that I could listen to, so many more ideas and things that could potentially be a test. But let me wrap up by saying a few things in terms of, I guess, my general thoughts. Number one, I haven't played on a lot of these mixers extensively. I've played a lot on a Rane Empath. I've played a lot, not like thousands of hours, but definitely dozens and dozens or at least dozens of hours on Rane 2016. I've never played a set on a Urei 1620. I've never played it in a set on a Rane MP24. I've played, I don't even know how much on a 900 Nexus. I've never played a set other than messed around with a few mixes with the DJR. Obviously a lot on Euphonia, a lot on a V10. Probably the most amount of hours, if I was to calculate everything, I probably have the most amount of hours on a Rane Empath. Because I would take in, like I said, like probably a decade of recording mixes, like 3-hour, 4-hour mixes on it. Weekly, if not twice a week for a decade is a lot of hours. Given that I've played on a lot of these, take a moment away from how they sound. There's a few things for me that are more important than just generally the sound. And that's crazy, right? Because I hold a position where what comes out of me as an artist is more important than anything else. You know, I'm not like a sexy brand. That's not my claim to fame. I'm not an activist. I'm not politically charged to like make a statement with anything. I just want to make music that makes people have some kind of emotional intent on the dance floor. Whether they're dance artists wanting to create cool dance art, whether you've had a rough day or a rough week of work, or you got stuff going on with your family and you need an emotional connection to a song to release to something. You want to laugh, you want to cry, you want to shout, you want to scream, you want to go through this emotional roller coaster on a dance floor. Like, what comes out of me is meant for you to take things to the church of the universe on a dance floor. That's what my art is. And being put in the position of a performer as like this conduit for the expression of my music. Some people are really truly DJs. I don't know if I'll ever really truly be a DJ in that way. But as a performer and a conduit for this music, when I'm put in the position where I'm using these tools that are designed for DJs, there are things about these tools that are most impactful for me. Number one, the power steering over the blend. I feel like the act of turning a knob is more powerful, to the point of the ergonomics of, especially how like I'm playing on a Euphonia now all the time, how I can reach with multiple fingers and I can level a track and shape the EQ all with one hand on one track and the other hand with the other track. I don't expect you to think I'm brilliant or something like that, but I've developed a dexterity to the instrument to try to be an extension of how I'm trying to purvey the music. Some people may be like, well, that's some DJ shit. That's some technical shit. Okay, sure, but that's not how I look at it. I look at it like I'm playing this instrument to convey this thing. The accessibility to what some of these rotary mixers have based off their ergonomics, I've developed something with Euphonia that I feel is really expressive, and I wouldn't say special to me, but it feels really expressive, and it's special to the way that I like to approach delivering the music. Okay, that's an important thing to me. The other thing is I like to have levels of sonic shaping and control. The Euphonias isolator and the way the isolator works versus the 3-band EQ and how that works, where the curves are, how it behaves, the adjustment that you have over the amount of boost or attenuation, with the fact on the isolator has different steps of that, different padding, etc. Super powerful. I'm sure there's other mixers that maybe do it, and I'm just not aware. But again, it's one of those things where I feel really good about it, and it feels really powerful, and it gives me so much more of like a producer, composer mindset to the way I deliver the music. It may not necessarily translate to you on the dance floor, or maybe it does over the extended period of time, and it gives you some kind of feels with the way I'm able to deliver stuff. Whatever. Other mixers that have that level of control, Pioneer V10, which might be, I'll say, for my choice mixer in terms of how I think things sound. But the Pioneer has all these tools, and even more so in terms of its effects, its options of effects, its fact that you have multiple controls over multiple levels of how you want the sliders to work. You have a 4-band EQ instead of a 3-band. It's got the compressor. It's got all this stuff. Like, it has more tools, yet it still feels, when I play it, to be less musical in that regard. Probably the fact that the sliders just never seem musical. They seem performative, which is cool for certain things, but it doesn't feel as musical. It never has. I've yet to run across a fader that feels as musical as a knob, for whatever reason, when it comes to that level of performance art using a DJ tool. I think the isolator is bunk, but I'm glad it's there. It's also ergonomically weird. The Rane, I always felt really good about. Touching one again after being on Euphonia for so long felt like the Rane Empath, rather, feels like it's lacking a bit in terms of power and control. The Rane 2016, I always loved with the accessory EQ and having that tool there, because I need an EQ. This is one of those things about the 1620 where it's like, if a mixer has no EQ, it's not for me. I'm not like hardcore about that kind of stuff. I'm not like, barefoot across a bed of nails type of guy. Like, I want the tools to be able to express myself, to be able to do the things that I want to do. Not having an EQ is make or break. But I always felt like the Rane had power. It has been a long time since I've done a set on the Rane 2016 to try to compare it to the Euphonia, like in terms of power and how it felt. But from what I recall, like I remember the first time using the Euphonia, it kind of gave me similar feelings, but with almost like I'm driving a new Porsche instead of an old Porsche. It's like, had like all the control and the feel, like I'm one with the vehicle, but you get in a new Porsche. And I say this like I've driven a lot of Porsches. I rented a Porsche once for my birthday, but it's like a new car, like the power, like a new sports car versus an old sports car. Whereas like I feel like I have the power, but I have all the technology available to me, if that makes any sense for folks. I'm saying all this to try and give you credibility to like how I feel about my experience with those mixers performatively. I've beat the hell out of some 900 Nexus 2s, and I've been on some beaten ass 900 Nexus 2s, and I really cut my teeth on learning like the ergonomics and performative ideas of what Pioneer can lend. And I've spent a lot of time on them, and I feel comfortable, and it feels like I'm there for it, and it can give me the result I need, which is probably more important than the most perfect sounding thing, because if I can put my soul into what I'm doing to deliver the music that I'm passionate about, that will probably have more impact, bar none, to the emotion and the intent that you're there for what you want on your dance floor as somebody there to listen to me, or to just be there, regardless if it's there for me or not. I'm probably going to deliver something that you need, rather than if it just sounds perfect and I am a bit hamstrung at my delivery, what that's going to do. Perfect sound is lovely, but you got to really be the connoisseur of the charcuterie to really encompass all that. Because if the if the delivery has the right intention and it's not constrained, the vessel isn't being bottlenecked, and they can convey their emotion, that I feel like that's going to be a more impactful thing. It's like the quality of the song. If the song's not the best mixed song in the world, but the song has this enrichment and this real like human attachment, like that is going to cut through like a razor blade compared to the most polished bullshit song that has no emotion in it whatsoever. There are features that I absolutely need on mixers. Some of these mixers don't have them. And call it like me being lacking as a DJ. That's fine. I'll let the hardcore DJs be DJs. I just want to be a guy that makes the music and delivers an experience. With that being said, drum roll, please. Which mixer out of the Shootout do I claim to be the best sounding mixer? Can you guess? Take a guess. The Pioneer V10. The Pioneer V10 sounds transparent, and that compressor knob is freaking Lord of the Rings level magic. That's it's crazy. It's so crazy doing this, having in this podcast with you. It has me wanting to check out the new Alpha Theta. Is it V3 or V5? I think it's V3. It's the new 3-channel. I think it's a 3. Yeah, it's a 3-channel. It's not rotary, which sucks. But it's like, it looks like a more condensed version of the V10 with less bells and whistles, but I'm almost positive it has the compression knob. And at first I was kind of like, super expensive. It's not rotary. It's not something that I would be interested probably. Maybe it'll pop up somewhere. Maybe it won't. But the fact that the V10 sounds so transparent, this is probably in that vein of the line, and it has the compressor. It really has me wanting to play around with it and listen to it. And now knowing what I know, listen for those things and listen and maybe get a chance to record it and see how it holds up. The V10's the winner for me. Isn't that crazy? Is it the winner of the mixer that I want to play on? No, I think I want to play on the Euphonia, but now I'm like, I need to borrow a V10 or just spend I have access to JV's V10. He's such a lovely guy. Let me go play on it whenever. But I need to spend some real hours on that and really feel much better. I feel comfortable on it. I could play one in the dark, but I think I need to feel more comfortable because there is a transparency there and a level of control that I am missing out on. And I was writing off of the fact that there's just too many knobs, too many options for X, Y, and Z, which is great for some people. But for me, it was kind of like deterring from the fact of what I want to do with the music. So I'm blown away. I would say runner up would be the Euphonia, and it's not necessarily the bias it's the mixer I feel the best to perform with. But I think honestly, sonically, the fact that it actually changes the sound where the Pioneer is transparent, I think that I like what it gives, and it's nice that it has that capability. But also, this has me completely in a different mindset of having that conversation. I'm pretty sure his name was Simon from Varia Instruments when we were talking about how they're trying to make their mixer as transparent as possible. It really has me changing my mind in terms of where value is there. And I don't know why I wasn't thinking about that originally, because I make the music. I spend so much time making the song sound the way I want to sound. Why wouldn't I want it to just be as close to that as possible? Why would I want something else to come in and change that? So V10 I think is the winner. You add in the compression knob and it's like fucking game over. That thing's serious magic. Here's my little hot take on surprise. I did not think the Rane 2016 or the Urei 1620 would be so transparent. I thought they were going to do wild shit to the sound. They're like really reasonably transparent, all things considered, other than the fact that they attenuate the air quite a bit, which may be just like a sign of the time for how old they are. Which might actually for like a lot of systems that maybe are a bit too abrasive, like loud systems, like where the highs are just too, they're hard to capture anyways, the air frequencies. Maybe it's not, maybe it makes things sound more musical. I don't know. I'm listening in a studio where I've acoustically balanced my listening position against a set of speakers that are extremely expensive, meant for engineering. So it's like I'm in like a very like, perfect air quotes, like perfect case scenario, although it's not perfect. It's like best case scenario compared to like being in a club or what have you. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Super long, super freaking nerdy. But that's what this is about. It's really about me being able to do the things that I'm passionate about, talk things that I want to talk about. I have so much more good stuff coming up. I wish I had the ability to record these more frequently. Life has been really good, but full of work, so it's taking me away. But it's not going to stop me from doing the stuff I want to do. And I hope if nothing else that inspires you to do what you want to do. Thank you again to the Patreon family for your love and support. Thank you, my brother JV Velasco, for hooking me up with the mixers and allowing me to record and do the shootout. I hope you get a chance to watch this, bro, and I hope that you find it entertaining. If you want to support the channel, patreon.com/Coflo, and you could throw me a little bit of change every month to help support videos like this, get VIP promos and access to other cool content. Please check out my music. You can head over to Bandcamp, coflo.bandcamp.com. You can check out my edits. I'll put the links in the description on YouTube, or if you just Google Coflo, I'm sure you'll come across a few things of mine, be it dance or music. Appreciate y'all. Thank you for tuning in and listening practice. See you in the next one. Peace.